About 5 centuries.
Okay.
And slavery in Roman society was ubiquitous. You would find slaves working in households, in the fields, in the mines, in brothels, but also you would find slaves carrying out roles that you wouldn't normally associate with slavery. For instance, it was common to use Greek-speaking slaves as teachers to the children, to the aristocratic children, because at the time, speaking Greek was like speaking French. It meant that you were well educated. It meant that you could then study the classical literature and poets. So it's part of like your education, part of your upbringing to speak Greek, to learn how to speak Greek. Also, the entertainers, like actors, were slaves. The chariot racers, and of course the gladiators as well. And a lot of people also get some different ideas because of the movies. Gladiators, although they were slaves, their lives weren't necessarily expendable because a lot of investment went into their physical training and nutrition and preparation for combat. And then they also performed in arenas with thousands of people. So they were akin to athletes at the time. They were the closest thing the society had to athletes. And many gladiators or chariot racers, when they became free men, they still carried on with that profession because it was what they knew how to do, and
it gave them fame as well, isn't it?
Exactly, so fame and money as well.
So it's a bit like you have the athletes performing today.
Correct. I mean, that concept, the athletes arena, was invented by the Romans. The circuses, those arenas, that was all invented by the Romans. But anyways, the Romans, as I mentioned, they stayed here for 5 centuries. Do you have any questions about them before I move on to another topic? No? After the Romans, you had the Visigoths and the Swedes. They were a Germanic tribe. They occupied Spain and Portugal after the fall of the Roman Empire, and they were the dominant force until the year 711. That's when the Moors invade. What do you know about the Moors?
Well, I know about the Black Moors. Were Africans, isn't it?
Yes, the Moors, they were the Muslims who came from what is now modern-day Morocco in the early 8th century and took over all of Portugal and almost all of Spain except the Asturias, and even invaded until the south of France. But the term was essentially used by Europeans to describe the Muslims who came from North Africa, from Northwest Africa. There were different periods of migrations. Some Moors were black Africans, some were Berbers, some were Arabs, Syrians. It depended really on the different ways of migration. But what unified them
was the religion.
Was the religion, correct. Religion, the language, Islam as a civilization, a political force. And they left behind a tremendous legacy here in Portugal and also in Spain as well.
Yeah, because you've got a lot more castles, is that right? Isn't it?
Yes, a lot of our castles in Portugal and in Spain were originally built by the Moors or by the Romans in the late 4th century, early 5th century.
And the Moors had slaves as well, did they?
Yes, they did as well. And they had black slaves, they had white slaves, they had Arab slaves. Basically, if you were non-Muslim, you were free game to be enslaved.
Do you think that's part of the reason why a lot of people end up joining the religion? Because obviously, once you became a Muslim, from what I understand.
Islamic societies offered more upward social mobility for
Yeah.
people who had become enslaved compared to what you'd find in a colonial setting, for example.
Because what I found on my research is that once you joined Islam, you would serve and then basically you'd be freed, you know, because you become part of the society.
If you eventually convert, yes, you have a big chance of becoming free, and some people actually became governors, generals. It's part of the historical narrative of Islam. In the beginning, there was the story of Muhammad and Bilal, who was the first person to climb the minarets and call the faithful to pray, and he was a former slave as well, who Muhammad had freed. One of the first converts. Careful, there's a car. One of the first converts to Islam.
Yeah, he's a black guy, isn't it? Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So that theme of redemption and escaping the bonds of slavery is part of the historical narrative of Islam.
So is that a picture of him there?
Yeah, it's an illustration of him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But anyways, as I was saying, Al-Fama is one of the areas that also has most elements of Moorish heritage. Even the name Al-Fama comes from Arabic, from Al-Hammam, meaning the hot baths. Because the Moors, they had, and Romans, they had hot baths in this area. Also, all the words in Portuguese and Spanish that begin with an A and an L come from Arabic.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we have hundreds of words, and even our word for God willing, Oshallah, comes from Inshallah.
Oh, okay.
Okay? But they also left behind a scientific contribution.
Okay.
It was the Moors who introduced the Arabic numbers, which is the numbers that we use today, you know?
Okay.
Also, they introduced tools like the astrolabe, which is a tool for cosmological navigation. It allowed navigators to use the stars to tell like where you were. So the Arabs, they would need to use it in the desert, right?
Okay.
The Portuguese and Spanish then use the tool in a different type of desert, the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay, there are no landmarks in the ocean. There's no landmarks in the desert, so you have to use the stars. They also introduced the lateen sail, which is a type of sail that made the ships more maneuverable, so they could tack against the wind and navigate along the coast of West Africa.
I know. So where did actually the first Moors come from?
The Moors, well, they come from Northwest Africa, from modern-day Morocco.
Oh, okay. And so was they originally Arabs or Africans?
The first dynasty, I believe, was the Abbasids, if I'm not mistaken, or the Umayyads. I think it was the Umayyads. You'll have to forgive me, I'm a bit rusty. They were the Umayyads, and they, I believe, were from Baghdad.
Okay.
Okay. But then you had the Almoravids, for example. They were from much further south, below the Sahara Desert, and the southern end of the Sahara Desert. They were described as being black as well, much darker skin. But like I said, the term refers basically to where you're coming from. It's not really an ethnic term. Okay. For example, when the Christians came to Jerusalem in the Crusades, the Arabs, they referred to all of them as Franks, even though some were from Germany, some were from England or France. They were all outsiders, so they would make that generalization, and that's what's left behind for us in our history books, basically.
So what's the difference between a Moor and a Muslim?
Well,
or basically a modern day Muslim. Is it the same thing, just a different term?
No, I think now if you'd use it, it would be considered pejorative. But if you're speaking in a purely historical context, it's basically to describe that period in history where much of where this part of Western Europe was under Islamic control.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.